Unemployed and Afraid acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on and of the land where you, the listener, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend our respect to any First Nations, Aboriginal, and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, acknowledging that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the glorious mess of building your own business with the people doing it. I'm your host and fellow business builder, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into some good, honest, small business chat. Hello, business builder. It is my absolute pleasure to have you here for another story of building business and all the real feels of the journey along the way. This chat you're about to hear with the wonderful Mal Chia, ecom expert and managing director of marketing agency Ecom Nation, reminds me of something so magical that happens in business. When you say yes to yourself, even just once, and begin the process of building that thing that you're working towards, thing 2, 3, and sometimes even 4 are pretty quick to present themselves. It's true that backing yourself into one opportunity opens the door to so many more that you might never have imagined. You just have to trust yourself to take one step in the right direction and remain open. Besides this thinking that this chat really reminds me of, that just gives me all the feels, it's about to deliver on some banging ecom and agency business insights for you. Very timely post/mid Black Friday sales chat, depending on when you're actually tuning in here with me. We talk about shifting from growing big business, other big businesses, to growing your own big business. The mirror moments gifted by others that show us, well, what's actually right in front of us. Backing what you know to be the right thing, even if it's not the most profitable right away. Saying yes to opportunities, even if you're not sure you're ready for them. Developing a realistic approach to consulting. Being passionate enough about your business to accomplish incredible things, and the role of sacrifice in business development. Mal has the kind of ambitious energy that is just contagious, and he's so very generous with the sharing of his journey and his business advice when it comes to e-commerce. So I know you are just going to love this chat. Let's get into it. I'm here with Mal Chia, a highly respected e-commerce advisor, Chief Marketing Officer, and Managing Director of marketing agency Ecom Nation. Ecom Nation is an integrated e-commerce growth agency founded by Mal and a crew of direct-to-consumer veterans with decades of experience working with the hottest brands who have now come together to partner with online retailers to grow and scale their businesses. Sitting at the intersection of strategy, branding, and technology, Ecom Nation deploys best practice e-commerce solutions across performance media, CRM and loyalty, and UX/UI to help retailers reach their full potential. And so far, they've helped over 30 brands achieve profitable and sustainable growth. Brands like V Underwear, Golf Gods, Oz Health Pharma, Zero Co, and more. He's an experienced thought leader who shares his insights through contributions to publications like Smart Company and Inside Retail, and on stages as a speaker. And he serves as an advisory board member at NORA, the National Online Retailers Association, and in direct consultation with ecom brands. Mal, I am very much looking forward to hearing your ecom business building story. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Thanks, Kim. It's great to be here.
It's so great to be here and to talk about something other than our pugs and our mutual love of pugs. But, pug people, we can't help ourselves. But
That's right.
without letting us go on a tangent straight off the bat, tell me how your business partners would describe you.
Oh, wow. I've never thought about that one before. Persistent, big thinking, likes a good read.
I like that. The persistent side, I think I remember fondly. We, of course, worked together about 20 years ago, which is terrifying. It ages us both.
It does.
But
16 years, actually. I think 2007, I want to say.
Oh, my goodness.
So 16, yeah.
And I remember your focus on securing the right brand visuals for what we were working on at the time, the rebrand of a radio station, and your focus on making it as good as it possibly could be and, that attention to detail. So I would align that persistence. I've seen that in action and I know that it's a good thing. So
thank you. I'm actually really quite pleased that that radio station still uses the same branding to this day, which is, I look at that going, that's remarkable. That's like Coca-Cola, like tenure.
I know, right? We've gone back a little bit already, but and we can go back as far as you like in your career. But before Ecom Nation, before your consultancy, who were you?
Who was I? So I've been working in the digital marketing and tech space for the longest time. Matter of fact, but before all that, I started as a DJ. That was kind of like my first love when I finished school. I finished school, and being a child of Asian parents, there was a big focus on going to university. So when I finished school, it was like I had to go to uni, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to study. I had friends who went to study commerce, so that was naturally where I wanted to go. What I decided to do, I should say. But really, my passion was in music and DJing. So I did one semester of uni before very quickly realizing that that wasn't for me, and then dropped out very much against my mother's wishes to become a professional DJ, which I did for the better part of 7 or 8 years until I was like 25, 26. But then it was from there, after DJing, that I actually discovered my love of business and marketing. I'd always been very entrepreneurial as a kid. And matter of fact, I started my first business when I was 14 years old, which was a mobile DJ business. After doing that business, I left school, became a DJ, and then started running nightclubs. And again, kind of realized that I'm really enjoying this business side of things, the promotions, the finances, the operations, all that. Then I started working in festivals. So starting to do some work with Future Entertainment, which was a big festival promoter back in the day, and then some other local ones in Adelaide, where we're from, where I realized that I was enjoying the business side of things far more than the music side of things. And which then made me realize that maybe I should actually go back to uni. Maybe I should go back and finish that degree, which I'd started almost 8 years prior. At Adelaide Uni, they have the 10-year rule. If you finish a degree within 10 years, you're all sweet. But if you finish a degree over more than 10 years, you almost need to reset. Like whatever you did in your first year no longer counts, and you need to go back and do that again. It's a really weird system. So I was at the 8th year, and I thought, I better finish this really bloody fast. So I did. So I finished my 2.5 years remaining on my degree in like 1.5. And then opportunity came up to do a master's after that, did my master's in marketing, and then launched into my professional career, which has led to many amazing stops, including University of Adelaide, Fresh FM, like we talked about before, a number of advertising agencies, but then also Uber, which is a bit of a game changer for me, and was kind of where my whole career kind of like everything coalesced, all the stars aligned perfectly with Uber, which is my love of being entrepreneurial, my love of marketing, my love of brand building, and my love of technology as well. Throughout this, at the agency, I tell people that I started building my first website when I was 16 years old. I have people working for me who are like 21. So they weren't even alive when I built my first website. They were 16 years away from being born when I built my first website. It's crazy. And I'm just like, oh my Lord, but that's how long I've been doing this in the digital space, learning everything there is about building websites, running ads, building communities and social media, and just generally being plugged into technology. So Uber was this great chance where everything just fell into one. And I spent 3 amazing years there at Uber as the first head of marketing in Australia before moving into a number of, I think I had like 4 or 5 different jobs in my 3 years there before leaving Uber, ending up at an activewear brand called Riderwear as their first chief marketing officer, and took them through a stage of very rapid growth from 2019 through to 2021 before I left there, and then went into advisory, where I now advise e-commerce brands around the world, primarily in Australia, a couple of international clients, but the time difference really sucks with young kids. And also then I went on to start Ecom Nation with my business partners, Paul and Andy.
Before I start picking your brain about how that happened in terms of the building of your business, I have to ask, what was on your first website? What was it?
My first website was a website about my mobile DJ business at the time, Conspiracy Entertainment. And I was 16 years old trying to figure out how to buy a domain, how to set up a domain, all that stuff. And it was so much trial and error. I remember it took me like almost a week to get things properly set up. So I built this site and hand coded the whole thing by copying the code from other websites I liked, tweaking it, loading it back into the browser to see what happened. So it was like it was hours and hours and hours. I would stay up all night because I was fascinated by how you can make this little code change and then everything would change in the website. You could change a background, you could change fonts, you could do this. You had to add padding here. And, I was obsessed with doing it. But yeah, it was for my mobile DJ business at the time, Conspiracy Entertainment. And I ripped off someone else's website. Can't remember whose. But I just went, I'm going to take that website, change some stuff on it, and hopefully no one notices. And they never did.
Oh goodness! Before the days of Squarespace, when it made it so easy for us, it's going right back there. But I understand, even that. Hey, there's no new ideas in this world. It's about joining ideas together to create your own interpretation. So I'm here for that.
That's right, absolutely.
Wonder if the other place is still around. But so let's go back to, I guess, that moment where you're starting to step into consultancy for yourself as your first step into going into business in your own world. What prompted that, and what were the first few steps that you took?
Yeah, great question. So what prompted it was kind of realizing that I was reaching a ceiling where I was. At Riderwear, I had a really great journey there, built an awesome team, took this brand globally from, a medium-sized, I guess, activewear brand in Australia, definitely probably one of the medium players, to then very much becoming one of the largest players in that space and really growing a big global audience as well. So that was an amazing journey. I learned a lot through there, and I thought I knew a bit about e-commerce, but more on the marketing side. That gave me real exposure to everything else. So from operations, customer experience, finances, and that really helped, again, consolidate a lot of my thinking around e-commerce. And it was after that where I realized that, okay, what was the next step for me? I didn't really have too much of a future, at Riderwear, because the next step up was a CEO. David is a founder and owner. He wasn't going anywhere. He loved his business. So it was realizing that, okay, well, I was hitting my ceiling very quickly there. And one thing I learned at Uber and throughout my career is that I am by nature a builder. I'm someone who wants to build new things. I want to build things. I want to help people. I want to grow things. And when businesses reach a maturity stage, that's kind of where I bomb out. That's where it's not really for me anymore, because it's more about stability. And Uber was the same thing. The first 2 and a bit years at Uber was just a wild, wild ride. We grew dramatically from, I think it was like 10,000 people on the database to like something like 11 million people on the database when I left. So quite amazing growth there. And I really enjoyed that. But when it came time for the company to become more corporate, more systematized, more about that maintenance stage, it wasn't really for me anymore. So I was reaching a similar point at Riderwear as well, where we'd grown to a certain point and, I'd moved us through many, many iterations, from where we were to where I was when I left. And there wasn't really an appetite to go further than that. So that was my sign to go, okay, well, I need to do something where I'm back building again, because I really wasn't the happiest at that point because I wasn't building. It was just sort of keeping the lights on, keeping things ticking over. And I'm actually met with a mentor of mine. I've got a few mentors who I meet with and I try to lunch with regularly. And we had a chat about what motivates me, what inspires me. And where we landed on with that conversation was that when I was talking to him about, do I go and work somewhere in-house? Do I find another job somewhere else? Do I do this? Do I do that? He asked me, he said to me, like, I've known you for like about 10 years. Where you get the most joy from is when you're helping other people. When you're mentoring, when you're coaching your team, when you're just like answering people's questions. And funny enough, we were actually at a lunch and then someone had come up who my mentor knew and wanted to ask questions, about their winery. And then I ended up speaking to them about how to go online. But he's like, that moment was like, you love that. You love helping other people. And so we said, why don't you go into consulting? Why don't you go back into consulting? Because I'd done a little bit earlier on. And I was like, okay, I've never really thought about that might be where I wanted to go back into. And funny enough, I actually knew Paul already. So Paul Waddy, my business partner, Paul and I had known each other for a little while, and he'd done a recent move. He'd left Shopo where he was, then he was at the CEO at the Horse. Then he left the Horse to then go into advisory full time. He was really doing some before. And that kind of inspired me to go like, maybe that is the path I want to go down. So I left Riderwear, gave my notice. And then at the end of that, I just very quietly thought, okay, I'm going to take a bit of time and just figure out what I'm going to do, exactly what that kind of looked like. But in the meantime, I'm just going to put a few feelers out there and just see, okay, well, maybe there might be some work out there immediately available. And the response was really quite crazy because I left Riderwear and it probably took maybe half a week to like sort of kick around and just like relax a little bit. I thought, I might see if there's a little bit of work. So I did the typical LinkedIn post to say, hey, I've left here now. I'm going to do this now. Hit me up. I'm going to take a bit of time, but there's a bit of time in the books if anyone wants to book me. Within like a week and a half, I was fully booked. So I'd gone from leaving a business, which I loved but needed a bit of a break from, thinking I was going to take a break, to then opening up the books on my consulting business, which just exploded straight away. And with so many great founders and so many great businesses not just from Australia, but also from the US and the UK as well, from people who knew of me, heard me on podcasts, seen me speak, or read something about me, who were just like, if you're available now, I got to work with you. So it was quite overwhelming and really like very humbling as well to get that sort of feedback to think that, oh wow, that people who actually listen to what the things I say, all the different speeches I do and the presentations, all the writing which I do, and people go, that really resonates with me. I want to work with this guy. So that was quite amazing.
Those mirror moments where people say things to you and go, oh, have you thought about this? And it seems so ridiculously obvious once it gets said by somebody else to you. It does sometimes take that. And I think, going down that path of mentoring or opening yourself to having conversations about what your future looks like without knowing is so often where these things are bred from and where they come from. And you touch on another aspect there that I find really important. I think for those of us who maybe haven't quite gone into their business yet, if there's a listener like, oh, I don't know, it's going to be something, or someone who's stepped into it, who's pivoting, no matter what stage you're at, that aspect of sharing your thoughts as widely as you can, if there is a stage available to you, if there is a blog that you can make yourself, if you have a LinkedIn profile, for goodness sakes, please flick it to creator and please start sharing. All of these aspects of just sharing your thoughts and your opinions and your expertise without fear, you never know where it's going to come back to you. And I really love that you brought that up as an aspect of your development.
I think a lot of it is just like speaking things into existence, almost. Well, probably one of the best pieces of advice I was given was when I was quite young. I think I was like maybe 13 or 14, where I wasn't the most confident kid back then. And I think one of my teachers said to me something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing, just like, if you can't, and I was complaining about how, my mum and my family weren't overly supportive of the choices I was making. And they were like, well, if you can't back yourself, how can you expect anyone else to back you? I was like, wow, that's actually really good advice. So I kind of took that, on board and went, okay, well, I'm just going to back myself. And I haven't always, and there have been definitely missteps in places where I haven't backed myself as much as I could have. But really, it's like it's almost having that irrational confidence to go and do something. It's the Dunning-Kruger effect, where if you know too much about something, you probably won't do it. But if you're young and stupid enough, you'll probably give it a go, and who knows, you might be successful.
I love this. I saw a video on where all great content is consumed from, TikTok. It's Anita from Hero Packaging. But she said the fun fact about her is she's completely delusional in that she's delusional about what she can achieve. So she's so focused on like, of course I can do anything. Being that level of delusional helps you actually get the things that you want anyway. Another way to profile, backing yourself, just believing in yourself and putting your dreams out there and not waiting until they're real or, you've got proof points to be able to say, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to like speak it into existence, exactly as you said.
Something else I often do as well is that I will, if it sounds like a good opportunity, I'll say yes. I'll say yes and I'll figure out how to do it later, generally.
I love that.
My wife doesn't love that. She's like, oh my God, how much more do you want to take on? But it's just like, well, do you know what? Who knows where this is going to end? Like, who knows what could come of it? Something might come out of it. Something might not come out of it. But I won't know until I actually do it, and properly embrace the opportunity. That is kind of knowing what your capacity is to actually properly execute it. I know people who take on way too much and are unable to execute any of it. But I feel if you are taking on stuff and to the point where, you can still execute well on it, then you should do it. And people say to me all the time, like, I don't have time to do this. Like, how do you find time to do X, Y, Z? And usually it's like, well, I watch Netflix and things like that, but it's not my life. I get joy from doing these other things. So it's always like, you can make the time for it, but it's always a choice. Like if you are back to back 24 hours a day, then yep, maybe you have no time for it. But if you're not, then you can easily make time for it. It's all about sacrifice.
And doing the stuff that means something to you and, a bit of that work-life integration, not looking at it all like work. It's growth, it's learning, it's opportunity, it's all of those things. You actually raise a really interesting point there where you talk about letting the opportunity come and then rising to the opportunity. So I want to use that as, I guess, a bit of a framework for thinking about your consulting business and then inviting on all these clients. Did you have a model at that stage in terms of how you would charge and how you would service these clients?
Actually, you know what? I did. I'd previously done consulting before, like much, much earlier, like 10 years prior to that. And I wasn't very good at it, mainly because I took on everything. Like I did a little bit of like web development. I did a bit of, ads management. I did a little bit of this, did a little bit of that. So my pricing was all over the place. Like for this, it's that. For that, it's that. And I went, man, that's unsustainable. And my brain was also fragmented into so many different ways. I had to think like a dev. I had to think like a this. I had to think like a that. So I went, okay, well, what do I actually want to do? So I want to do strategic advisory. So e-commerce strategic advisory. I'm your outsourced e-commerce advisor or outsourced CMO. That was me. So thinking about, okay, well, how much do I charge? And I didn't want to overcharge, I didn't want to undercharge. So I actually started with, well, how much do I actually want to make? So starting off with how much do I want to make? How many hours do I want to work? And then going like, well, this is also, I don't want to be like working 70, 80 hours a week. So how much do I need to charge to make sure that within 30 hours or 40 hours a week, I can still charge that. And if I'm fully booked, I'm very happy. But if I'm maybe at half capacity, I'm still doing I'm not starving.
I think that's a brilliant approach, is to go from the top down and work it out. And then if anyone's listening doing the same thing, for God's sakes, please add 10%. I think we always undervalue ourselves. Even when we start high, we're like, let me just tweak here. So yeah.
But I think but you need to know though. You need to know like what's your limit? Like, what do you actually want? There's a great book from Chris Voss, who's a hostage negotiator, called Never Split the Difference, where he talks about like when you're in a hostage negotiation, not to say that your life is a hostage negotiation, but when you go into negotiation, you need to know what you're willing to give up, which is like, you need to know how far you're willing to go. And then that's it. That's your fixed part, So in the same way that when you're thinking about pricing, when you're thinking about, your job, you're thinking about anything, it's like, well, what are my limits? Like, how far am I willing to go? And then you set that. And if it goes, anything up to that point is great. But if it goes over that, forget it.
And it takes a lot of confidence to get to that space, which, I think is an important aspect to raise, like developing and seeing that what you're putting out to market is what something wants. Do you feel like you needed to see a little bit of that coming back to you to reinforce that confidence?
Yes. Hearing from people and the response from there did add to that. But I already knew before that I was able to do it. Mainly, I'd done it so many times. And I guess my superpower is being able to identify patterns, in a business, in data, in how you operate things, and very quickly go like, okay, based on this is what you need to know. This is what you need to do. So that was something which I became good at. And because I spoke so well about it, I was fairly confident with what I did in the e-commerce and marketing space, being able to look at some data, being able to look at how a business is run, being able to look at how you're ordering stock and just be able to go like, great, this is what you need to be able to do. So I already kind of had that confidence already, but that confidence was born from years and years and years of practice, but also knowing how to use data as well. Because data, I got to say, gives me the confidence, because I'll have an assumption, I'll have a hypothesis, I'll analyze the data. And if the data backs it up, great. Then it gives me confidence to keep going for it.
So take me from where you were there. So consulting is, kind of ruining your plans for a relaxed break and easing into working for yourself. I'm suspecting here that something else has come in to ruin your plans. So tell me about how Ecom Nation came into the picture.
Yeah. So after I posted that on LinkedIn, about a couple of days after that, Paul and Andy both reached out to me. They're my business partners. So I know both of them independently. And this is in itself quite a funny story. So Paul and I know each other through e-commerce circles. We'd actually, during COVID, been on a few, I think it was a Hangouts or not Hangouts. What was the house party or one of those apps? Clubhouse, that was it.
Yes, I remember that briefly.
Yeah. I don't even know where that is now. But we were on a few clubhouses together and we were chatting. So I got to know Paul a little bit through there. And then I was a recipient of a top 50 people on e-commerce awards. I went to the awards night and got to meet Paul face to face. And then in South Australia, being South Australia, first thing Paul said to me was that, hey, everyone in South Australia knows each other, right? And I said, well, yeah. Before I even had a chance to finish, he was like, do you know Andrew Sabatino? And I was like, yes, I know Andrew Sabatino. Well, he's my best friend. And it's like, oh my God. So we took a photo, sent it to Andy, because Andy and I go back about 20 years. Andy and I went to uni together. And then we were at Fresh FM together. So he was a member back when I was the general manager there. And then from there, we then reconnected many years later at a conference which both of us were speaking at. And then a few other times since, he came to a presentation, actually a workshop I was doing on running Google ads. And he came along to a few other things as well. So we stayed in contact a little bit. So it just blew my mind that, both these worlds combined, collided. Paul and Andy knew each other. But anyway, then after I left RightAware, started doing the consulting, made that post on LinkedIn, Paul and Andy both reached out to me independently and reached out and said, and just asked me if we could have a chat. And it's like, oh, okay, well, this is kind of funny that you're both reaching out to me. And I didn't realize that it was because they both knew each other. Well, that I knew they knew each other, but because that they had been talking. And what they'd been talking about was to create an e-commerce agency. Now, Andy owns a very successful marketing agency in the not-for-profit space. They do very high level strategic not-for-profit advice, and they're all made up of not-for-profit experts. So people who'd been working in the NFP scene for a long time, so very experienced in that sector. He and Paul had been talking and were tossing around the idea of creating an e-commerce agency, like a marketing agency for e-commerce made up of e-commerce veterans, like people with a background in retail, people who really understood retail. So they reached out to me as someone who has come from that background as well and pitched me the idea about starting an agency. From a 45-minute phone call, I'm pretty sure I said, I'll think about it. And then within 24 hours, I replied back and said, yeah, why not? Let's do it. Going back to if it sounds like a good opportunity, just do it. So I was doing this while setting up my consultancy as well, and that was already thriving and going quite well. And then Ecom Nation came up, the opportunity to do that. And a lot of it just came from the fact and why it was such a great idea for me to do and why I thought, let's do this, is because I believed in all that. Because when I was working on the client side, I fired a lot of the agencies. Actually, I think I fired all the agencies we were working with because none of them actually understood what was important for the business. Every agency was very focused on the things which were important to them, which from an advertising point is, ROAS, from a SEO point, it's keyword rankings, and they would keep telling me all these things, when I was a CMO going, hey, we got this keyword ranking, we got this, check it out, we're number one in all these categories. And they had the paid media agency telling me that they got X amount of ROAS on Facebook and X amount of ROAS on Google, please give me more money. And I looked at all this going like, yeah, but none of you actually giving me incremental results. Like you're telling me that you're doing all this great stuff. And you said that your ROAS has gone from a 5 to a 10, but my revenue hasn't doubled. So you're doing stuff which has made the ROAS look great in platform, but hasn't actually led to a tangible incremental return for the business. So of course I'm not going to give you money. Then I had the SEO agency telling me that, we've got all these number one keyword rankings. We're doing such a great job. Why don't you up our retainer? We'll do even more good work. And I looked at the organic search results and went, but we're not getting any more organic search traffic. So that makes absolutely no sense. You can get all the keyword rankings you want, but if it's not actually adding value to the business, why would I possibly do this? So that was kind of like how I talked and also what I talked about a lot as well, when I was speaking at the time, which obviously hit a chord with Paul and Andy. So when they came through with that opportunity, it just really made sense to really create an agency which really understood what e-commerce founders, e-commerce businesses needed from a growth point of view, but also from a profitability point of view, that it wasn't just about driving growth and in terms of sales growth, but it's also about doing it profitably as well to make sure that at the end of the day, that founder, that business has more money in their bank than when they got into it. And you look at Black Friday, all these businesses are going to, all these brands are going to do these incredible sales, these epic sales, and they're going to sell out of so many things, but they would have dropped their pants to do that. And a lot of them, I guarantee you, are going to be less profitable in November than they were in October because they've discounted so much and they've spent too much on advertising.
Yes, I love seeing this happen in spaces like LinkedIn and, spaces where you share. You've got a great podcast as well that talks about some of this. I'm going to make sure that's linked in the show notes too. But yes, it's this overinvestment in eyeballs coming through, getting as many people through. Like you said, dropping the pants, like the discount philosophy versus prestige pricing and the kind of the opportunity that comes with that makes me think a lot. And, I think so many businesses don't think about that because they get advice from the wrong people and they forget about what their brand stands for and they forget about, brand love and they forget about, returning customers, like getting these people back, give them some love. Yeah, I could pick your brain about this all day. And I love how passionate you get about that as well and about seeing beyond just getting a return on that ad spend. Just what else is it doing? And what's the P&L? What's the margin? Like what is the actual revenue of a business, not just the stuff that you have to keep maintaining, right? It's like being a bleached blonde. You don't want to have to maintain those roots all the time. It gets expensive.
I wouldn't know.
But before we go down that absolute tangent, tell me about getting Ecom Nation together and seeking your first clients, kind of getting yourself out there. So before you can look at proof points and client results, of which you have many now, before that aspect, how did you take yourself to market and what challenges did it bring up?
Really, it was just word of mouth primarily. And all our first 10 clients, I would say, were just pure word of mouth. So there were word of mouth through people who knew we were starting this, but most likely there were clients who Paul and I were already advising, in our strategic advisory business, who were looking for help. And then we're just like, well, hey, why don't you work with our agency, Ecom Nation? So a few of them were already kind of coming in fairly warm, but one of the biggest challenges we had was that we didn't have a reputation. People didn't know us, even though they knew Paul and I. They didn't know Ecom Nation as an agency. So we didn't have that body of work. We didn't have like the amazing marketing. We didn't have all these things to show people that, we can 10x your ROAS and do whatever else. So it was a leap of faith for a lot of them to come into the business. And I'm proud to say that, quite a few of our clients who were with us from the early days are still with us now, which is amazing. But a lot of them, it was a bit of a leap of faith, but cushioned by the fact that they knew Paul and I, and they knew Paul and I would be very active. We'd be very involved in the strategy. We'd be very involved in the execution. And so that gave them a lot of confidence. So it was kind of like bit by bit, you can see with anything, like, the start was a little bit slow in the first few months. It was like, it was consistent. We were growing, but it wasn't like, hockey stick growth. But then if you look at the growth curve, it's like, after like the first 6 months, I'd say, things really start to pick up because we're not a brand new agency anymore. We're new, but we're not just like, we're not a fresh baby anymore. So people can look at that and go like, okay, great. Well, you work with some pretty decent brands now. All right. I know you and Paul, you guys are very respected in the industry. All right, let's come on board. So at the start as well, larger clients would kind of shy away from us because, again, we didn't have the pedigree. They didn't really understand the resourcing. They didn't really understand what we're all about besides me and Paul. But over time, especially in the last 6 to 12 months, that's grown. Got a lot more larger businesses. I'm talking businesses doing 30 to 50 million plus, who are now coming to us and we're working with them because they like our approach, because our approach isn't a typical churn and burn agency where, we'll just manage the ads and that's it. We get really deep into the strategy. We really get deep into understanding what are the levers for the business. What are the functional and emotional benefits which your customers need to feel so that we can craft the right strategy for that, not just across ads, but also looking at your email marketing, your Shopify, your website, and making sure you've got this really consistent user experience, which is going to lead to high converting customers who spend more with you over a longer period of time. And we look at a lot of data for that. And I always tell the team, like, what we do doesn't scale because it doesn't, because we crunch a lot of numbers. We create a lot of dashboards. We're not just looking at Facebook and automating some rules based on when things happen. We're really looking at their net profit. We're looking at how much they're spending on marketing. We're looking at their margins. We're looking at their customer acquisition costs. We're looking at their lifetime value. We're looking at all these things holistically to be able to make a strategic decision on what we should be assigning capital to. Where we should be allocating resources towards more new customers or more about retention, focusing more on, middle of the funnel because we're bringing people in, but they're not converting. And these things aren't easy to do. These things take time. These things, again, it's going back to that pattern recognition like I talked about before. You need to look at all the data outside of the ad platforms to be able to make those sort of decisions.
Yeah. I mean, I can see why your clients have stuck with you through that, and you're becoming a part of their business by the sounds of it and being almost like a partner, like you're on their board and not just buying ads for them.
That's kind of how we look at it as well. Like we do look at ourselves as trusted partners for our clients. So, it's more than just about buying ads. We really want to feel like we're an extension of their team. That they can, we've got shared Slack channels so they can just go to the Slack channel and ping us like literally anytime. To ask us questions. Someone will get back to you very, very shortly, except for overnight, to answer the question, to make those changes. Because one of the philosophies which I brought over, one of the values I brought over for Uber is think like an owner. Think like an owner, not a renter. And in our case, we want to think like the founders. We want to think about what's important to them. So if the website goes down, that's a big deal because suddenly they can't pay their bills. They can't pay their suppliers. They can't pay their staff. They can't pay X, Y, Z. So it's incumbent on us not just to say, oh, well, get your developer to fix it. It's like we get actively involved in the problem. If the developer's not being responsive, we'll be in there fixing it for them. And I remember once actually having to change some code on a Shopify site at 20 minutes before a sale went live from my car because a client called me and said, we can't get in touch with our developer. The whole checkout's gone down. Can you help us? So I'm just like, hold on, pulled over, got the laptop out, hotspotted it, and just went, okay, tell me the problem. And then just went through it with them because I knew the sale was starting in 20 minutes, but the checkout wasn't working. So that's obviously just like, okay, that's like battle stations. Everyone needs to down tools and go put out this fire.
Thank God for 16-year-old Mal's coding experience coming in handy there. You raise a good point about things being able to be scaled up versus, service-based and with a little bit of a ceiling based on the hands-on service. I think that's something that a lot of business owners would play with in terms of the idea. And there seems to be a little bit of a shift in recent business approach, which is, not everything has to be a unicorn. Not everything has to be the next Uber, the thing that's going to be massive. But we can maybe put a little bit more emphasis and passion towards those businesses. I think they call them elephant businesses now. So the businesses with heart, considering the scalability of what it is you do. And if it makes you happy to do that, and it makes your clients really happy, and that you can then show your worth through the prestige offering that you're giving to people, and scaling in kind of smaller increments. Has that been your experience through the growth?
Yeah, that was actually a very deliberate part of why we decided to do this, because none of us wanted to create a churn and burn agency. We didn't want to create an agency which is going to bill $100 million a year, and has thousands of clients, and we were working our team to the bone. That wasn't our intention. Our intention was to create something which would add real value to our clients and their lives. So that was a big part of looking at what we do, going like, well, actually, we don't want to we don't want to be that agency. So we've also got like caps in terms of like the number of clients one of any of our team can work with, because we want them to be able to actually do the best work for them. Whereas I hear about some other agencies where you've got people who are working across 20, 30 clients. And I think about that going like, how can you possibly do your best work across 20, 30 clients? You're like spending an hour a week at the most, on any of them. And that's not fair. That's not right either. You need to be able to look at the numbers. You need to think critically about what's going on in an ad account, not just implement a template and structure and just go. You need to be able to think about this stuff, and then you need to have that back and forth with the client. So yeah, our goal was to build a elephant business, like you said, to build one which wasn't going to necessarily be like, if it becomes $100 million business, fantastic. But that wasn't our intention, to scale that as fast as we can. It was about creating something which would generally and materially improve the brands which we work with.
How does it feel now to have gone from someone who's led teams and big teams of people on behalf of a business to being responsible as the head of a business for your staff in terms of, their financial well-being and their safety? How does that feel?
It feels about the same, to be honest. Like I lie. It actually is. There's significantly more pressure when you're the business owner and you're the one paying the bills. When you're the one, paying the paycheck every week, where you're responsible for their livelihoods, their families, their mortgage, like you said before, it is a big responsibility. So you definitely do bear that weight of responsibility as a business owner. Which means that you need to be more careful about it and considerate about the decisions you make, about how it impacts everyone else. But also remembering that, people aren't replaceable either. I think the whole idea that, people are just cogs and you can swap people in and out, I think is completely false. Everyone is unique. Everyone's got unique personalities and unique gifts which they bring into the business. So I think it's really important to make sure that you spend the time with each one of them and understand them as people. So that part of my leadership hasn't really changed from one place to another. I did that back at RideAware, I did that back at Uber, and it's what I'm doing now. But then having that added responsibility that, okay, I need to make sure that I do my very, very best to make sure that, we are profitable, that we are winning work, that we are not overworking our team. So we're hiring, intelligently, so that we don't stretch ourselves while, like I said, keeping an eye on the bottom line as well.
What's keeping you up at night at the moment with your business?
Well, I was going to say my 4-year-old, but or the 1-year-old, they're keeping me up. Nothing really keeps me up. I sleep pretty well. When I was younger, I didn't sleep so well, and I'm not really sure why that is. I think I'm in a healthier and better place now, just in terms of being able to just compartmentalize things better than I was when I was younger. When I was younger, I used to just let things kind of bleed over from my personal life to my professional life and things like that. But I'm getting much better at being able to try to compartmentalize things, but also in terms of just being able to knock things off as well. I'm pretty systematic in terms of how I work, so I don't let things linger for too long. Probably one of the best things I did was actually to confront things head on. Like if there's an issue, I want to deal with it straight away, rather than just letting it sit there and just. I speak to people on my team who ponder about the same thing for days and days or weeks and weeks. I'm like, just do something about it. Just speak to that person straight away. Like, I've got an issue with blah, blah, blah. Like, great. Talk to them. Just address that directly and solve it, rather than letting it fester, which keeps you up at night.
That's so true. It's that old ethos of, how many rocks can you put in the bucket? Put the big one in first and then the little ones around it.
I remember that one. That's great. Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
It's a very good approach. Where do you hope to see your business, plural, grow to over the next few years?
Look, I'm hoping that we'll continue on this growth path. I don't want to put a number to it. Our intention was never to be the biggest, but it is to be the best. I would like us to be, the most respected e-commerce agency in Australia. Hopefully expanding out into other countries where we do have a US and UK clients as well. So hopefully expanding more into those markets, but just to continue to build our profile as a thought leader. but also to be able to help more businesses actually do e-commerce the right way, to do it in a way which is profitable and sustainable rather than just pumping a whole lot of money into it, particularly as like the next 2 years aren't going to be comfortable from a retail point of view. So people are going to struggle. So helping as many great brands not struggle and succeed through this time is really my goal through both businesses. Not to mention the other two. I've got two other businesses.
This is a drop. This is a bomb drop at the end of the podcast. What are these businesses?
So I have an online coaching business, e-commerce coaching. So I'm doubling down on the stuff I'm really good at, tripling down actually. So there's an online coaching business, a mastermind, which Paul and I are going to be launching very, very soon, probably at this point in 2024. And the other business is a sustainable toothbrush.
Cool. Yeah. Well, put me on the list for both of those, please.
Absolutely.
I would love to be a part of both of those. Very, very cool. And look forward to having you back on the podcast again to talk about both, because that sounds like a really exciting evolution. Look, this podcast now exists 100% to bring the stories of business owners together at all levels, at all stages. It's designed to help more of us get into business and stay in business for ourselves, because it is bloody hard to do this gig and it takes a lot of guts and it takes a lot of challenge. And we don't get there without hearing from other people who've, kind of been there, done that, doing that, starting to do that, all the different phases to help normalize it for all of us. And I always finish the podcast with this one question, because I think without being there for each other, without being able to connect over the experience that is being a business owner, we're kind of nowhere. So what can the listener and I do to support you in your business growth, aside from buying a toothbrush when it is available?
Check out my content. So follow me on LinkedIn, listen to the podcast, interact with my posts on LinkedIn. Yeah, look, it would just be great to hear from people. If anyone has any questions as well, I'm always up for a chat if I have time. I can always flick you a link to my Calendly. You can book in a 15-minute chat. I'm always up for just having a chat and meeting good people and seeing how I can help.
I love that, and can attest that you are a very wonderful person to talk to, as I have chewed your ear off for approximately 45 minutes now. So I will make sure that I will have the links to your Ecom Nation website, your LinkedIn, your podcast as well, which is a wonderful resource, and any other links you want to share with me. I'll stick those in the show notes. So listener, go get around Mal, all of the things he's doing. Mal, thank you so much for sharing your business story with me today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Kim.
One quick thing. If you're hearing this, you've listened all the way through. Hopefully that means you really like this podcast, because it's pretty generous to give up 40 odd minutes of your time for it. If that is the case, please leave the show a star rating and a review. It helps me reach so many more people who might also listen all the way through and get some benefit and some support out of it. Not to mention, it puts a real spring in my step to read them. Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the podcast for small business builders with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you love it, you can say thanks with a star rating and a review. And of course, join the community on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Find us at Unemployed and Afraid wherever you're hanging out, and I'll see you there.